Here are some common words associated with finding new clients for your MSP. Frustrating, mystifying, slow. But actually for some, it's also unexpectedly scary. Not scary because of how the bank balance looks, but scary for you personally. You've probably heard me say before about the importance of putting you in your marketing. But how do you do that if the idea of doing that fills you with dread? My special guest today can help you to build a personal brand on LinkedIn. He can help you to get over your fears and show you why your leads and prospects will see you and your MSP differently.
Hi, I'm Neal Schaffer, a fractional CMO, author, educator, speaker who specializes in digital content, influencer, social media marketing.
And thanks so much for joining us on the show, Neal. We're going to get you to talk today about LinkedIn. There are two areas in particular that I want to talk about. The first is MSP owners developing their own professional brand on LinkedIn. We're going to talk about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I think it's also overdue that we talk about AI in LinkedIn as well and how you can use AI as a content creation tool. Again, let's look at the good things and the bad things about this, because I know that you're a particular expert on both of those issues. So Neal, let's do a bit of credibility checking with you. Tell us a little bit about you, your career, what you do with MSPs and with other kind of businesses, and why we should trust what you've got to say about LinkedIn.
Great. Well, I should start out by saying I started my career in B2B sales, semiconductors, embedded software, network management software. So I know a lot of the space somewhat indirectly that the MSPs deal in. And being in B2B sales, I also understand that the MSPs that I engage with are very focused in sales and business development, but very light on the marketing side, right? Where they can use a lot of help. So I bring that B2B sales experience and, VP of Asia sales. I did all my work in Asia, actually, even though I'm an American. So I had to work with people in different cultures, China, Japan, Korea. And I began to foster this really holistic business perspective. So fast forward, I moved back to the United States after living 15 years in Japan after graduating from university. And it's 2008 and LinkedIn is starting to boom. I got heavily involved in it. I launched a blog and lo and behold, I, ended up becoming invited to speak at events. I published my first book back in 2009, which was on LinkedIn called Windmill Networking, Understanding, Leveraging, and Maximizing LinkedIn. January 2010, I got consulting gigs lined up and I decided to, pull the plug from corporate and go solo from then. So over the last 15 years from 2010, I ended up writing my second book on LinkedIn called Maximizing LinkedIn for Sales and Social Media Marketing, really taking that B2B perspective on social media and on LinkedIn, which has become quite mainstream today. But I also do social selling trainings for, salespeople, financial services, other industries. I've been invited to speak at events like, a conference put on by Motorola for their internal employees. And I recently decided, there's been a lot said about LinkedIn over the years, but I think that I still have a perspective and a voice, and I want to give a new and fresh perspective on that. So I just published a new book right now, only available in ebook. I am going to expand it into a paperback, but it's called Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth. And it includes the most up-to-date information, even my perspective on AI and how you can use that on LinkedIn. So that's my street cred. My motto is educate and empower. So I'm not an agency. I am a fractional CMO. I work with businesses, it could be anywhere from 3 months to a few years, but it's not a black box project or consulting gig. I become an employee. I report to the CEO, and it's really about transferring my IP to your team. So, educate and empower is my motto. That's the way I work. And I'm just excited to be here to help everybody virtually.
And if we were to cut you, Neal, you would literally bleed LinkedIn blue. That's how much you're embedded with LinkedIn. I mean, we've all watched the platform change over the years, and the LinkedIn of old is completely different to the LinkedIn of today. I personally think Microsoft have actually been great custodians, that they've made the platform better. And certainly if you look at other social media platforms, we're talking about you, Facebook, and certainly you, X. I mean, let's not even bring X into the equation. But if you look at Facebook, well, no, if you look at Facebook, Facebook has steadily become a worse product in that it's become more addictive and showing us more of the things we don't want. And I know that they're getting record revenues and profits, but I think eventually that's going to come back and bite them. You can look at LinkedIn and I use LinkedIn for my own marketing. I use it for my pleasure sometimes. I quite enjoy sitting looking at posts, and I don't mind the odd advert or the odd sponsored things, but you get to see people you really know and the stuff that they're doing. Is your experience of LinkedIn, because obviously you're a lot closer to it than any of us, Is your experience as it's developed over the last 10, 15 years that yes, it has become an even more valuable B2B tool?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because the MSP owners and others that I work with and the first conversation we have, it's the exact same first conversation I had back in 2008 and 2010. And the conversation is that the MSP owners like, LinkedIn is just, I only want to connect with people I know. I keep it personal. Why are all these people sharing selfies, et cetera, right? And what happens, social media changes over time. The workforce now, at least in the United States, is a majority millennial. So, of course, it's going to change with the times. Over the course of 15 years, things are going to happen. And I like to adapt. I'm a lifelong learner. I want to thrive in whatever environment I'm in, as any B2B salesperson should, right? So, once you take your emotions, and I see this just in general with marketing, a lot of MSP owners have emotional, we don't want to do this or we definitely want to do this. And once you take your emotions out of your marketing decisions and you look at the data and you treat social media more as a business tool, there's still a personal side to it, don't get me wrong. I think that really, the mindset shift really unlocks the opportunity. So yes, I agree with you. LinkedIn has only evolved. They're now doing video, dedicated video tab on the app. There's a wide variety of content that you can publish there that you can't do on other platforms. It's funny because from an engagement perspective, because LinkedIn makes money from various ways, not just from advertising, because they have Sales Navigator, they have, recruiting solutions, they can give more engagement in the feed and have less ads. And I think that shows. And I see a lot of, entrepreneurs have actually shifted from an Instagram to a LinkedIn because they actually get more engagement there. And it truly has become more of an engaging platform. Back in the day, Paul, I think you remember LinkedIn groups were the rage, like back in the early 2010s. I definitely generated a lot of traffic from them, business from them. But today it's really the engagement's in the feed, right? It's in the content. And any MSP owner who is not taking part in that, either in the content creation or in the engagement, which can lead to further conversation and leads, is really missing the boat.
Yeah, I completely agree. And LinkedIn groups were so exciting when they first came out and everyone rushed to join the relevant groups, but they never went back. And I think you're right. It's all in the feed now. Okay. Just today, just about 4 hours before you and I have done this interview, I was chatting to an MSP because I talk to 2-3 MSPs a day, and I kid you not, Neal, the question. And this isn't meant to embarrass this person who I'm not going to name, but one of his questions was, should I really put my photo on my LinkedIn profile? And we looked at his LinkedIn, and it was like a placeholder. I don't know if it was like a LinkedIn placeholder or he'd uploaded a placeholder image, but it was a real head in hands moment for me. And it's really interesting that you say you're having the same conversations with people that you were sort of 15, 16, 17 years ago. Tell us why, as the owner of the business, every MSP needs to be all over LinkedIn and build up that personal brand. And what does that personal brand look like in your opinion?
Yeah, this is a really deep conversation, but I go back into my sales history, and there was one deal that I got from a very famous Japanese consumer electronics manufacturer. And my VP of sales said, Neal, only you could have gotten that deal, a multi-six-figure deal, because it was the relationship I had built, right? Sales is all about relationships. Marketing is all about relationships. People buy from people they like, know, and trust. We all know that. So why are we ignoring the number one place where we spend our time online is social media? So when I talk to older MSP owners, I realize that the people that don't understand it are the people that don't use it, or they've never been influenced to use it in the right way because of people in their circle, people in their family, in their network, what have you. But if I just dumb it down, and you see this book behind me, Digital Thread. So I actually came out with this book like 2 weeks after Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth. Long story, but I dumbed down digital marketing to 3 main components. We have search, email, and social. And search is that discoverability, which can also happen in social, but it's primarily search engines. And now we have AI search engines, right? We have email marketing automation, which I'm assuming every MSP owner is all over. And if not, they should be contacting Paul and get that going. And then we have the social part. So you can't ignore that. By staying off of LinkedIn as an MSP owner, you are completely ignoring that 1/3 of the equation where people spend the time. And it's not about, yes, we want to get direct business on LinkedIn, but it's more about developing the relationships, right? It's developing relationships with your employees when they post something up and you want to celebrate them, or your salespeople who are actually sharing the fact that you're doing an event next week or a webinar, and you want to thank them for that. Or your customers, when they report, record earnings thanks to your help, you want to be the first one to like it and comment on it, right? And when other people are talking about the challenges they have with their current MSPs, you want to be there to comment. And it's all these conversations, and behind the conversation is a real person. It's not a 9-year-old trying to pretend they're an 18-year-old on a TikTok or an Instagram. These are actual business people with profiles behind them. So you not having your profile photo is like going to a networking event or going to an MSP event and having like a paper bag over your head, right? 90% of the content that we process is visual, and generating that like, know, and trust often comes down to the visual, not just in your profile photo. I would go further. We can look at your profile. All roads lead back to your profile. What is that header image you have, or the cover image? Right? What is, you have a featured section, which you can feature visuals. Are you featuring them there? I recommend my clients to feature visuals throughout their profile, but it really begins with that profile photo. So then you begin to ask, well, Neal, what sort of visual should I have? And this really comes down to your branding and content strategy. So I find when I talk to a lot of MSP owners that the MSP is really shaped in them, right? It's their personal brand offline that has brought in the business and the referrals to bring in even more business, right? It's now about translating that to be online. I think back before social media, I worked for a startup out of Ottawa, Canada, and my CEO, founder would come over, and because he was a CEO and I was, VP of sales, I'd be able to get some pretty high level people at the Sonys and the Panasonics and the Sanyos and Sharps to meet with them. And he would tell these stories of why these other companies decided to work with us, or why he started the company, or why they decided to put this one feature in, or provide this managed service or whatever it is. And it's those stories that I think every MSP founder listening to this has. It's now a matter of translating that into content. It's a matter of translating that into visual branding. Right. And it requires a mindset shift. It also requires working with, a company like yours, Paul, or a fractional CMO or consultant or someone. But I think once you make that switch, it's now we're accompanying a mindset shift with a strategic shift and actual implementation, you begin to see a lot more activity, and the activity is really strategically focused. So yes, the personal branding, the entrepreneurial approach is that visual branding that makes clear, because there's a lot of other MSPs out there, as we know, what is different about your company. It's often in, the colors, the visuals that you use on your website and your logo, or maybe you have like a motto, like mine is educate and empower, whatever you have, right? And it's bringing out those visuals in that cover image so that when people go to your profile, they immediately know, who you are, what you do, and what your company does. But it also goes into the story. The storytelling that I talked about, that you can infuse in your content, that you can infuse in your profile. So instead of having a very boring profile, which isn't engaging, you have something that becomes more of what we would call in digital marketing a lead magnet. So I believe it's the storytelling, it's the emotional connections, it's done through the engagement in the feed, but it really starts with your profile, putting your house in order, and then starting to slowly create this content, which really is an extension of what you've been talking about all along offline.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And I know a lot of MSPs struggle with the fact that on LinkedIn, the kind of content that perhaps they want to talk about, like technology, cybersecurity, backups, ransomware, all of that kind of stuff, is the kind of stuff that ordinary business owners and managers aren't interested in. And, the fact that sometimes the more personal content is more appealing. Again, a lot of MSPs struggle with that. I used a plugin into my Chrome about 6 months ago to have a look at my own LinkedIn. I can't remember what the plugin's called, but it showed that my most engaging piece of content ever was to do with a birthday gift that I'd given to my dad on his 70th birthday. And I'd done a little just off the cuff video. It was actually him in a World War II bomber. It didn't fly, but it kind of did what's called an airport run, or an airstrip run, where they kind of run it down the airstrip. And I couldn't believe that was my most engaging piece of content. All of the content I put out about MSP marketing, no, don't care about that. That was the most engaging thing. Now I'm quite happy because that's just part of my personal brand, because it shows that I'm a good son. I'm enjoying time with my family, all of that kind of stuff. Do you think that kind of personal content and that kind of real life content has a place, and what proportion of that should be in the mix?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great point. I have a dedicated chapter on content and maximizing LinkedIn for business growth, because that's really what it comes down to on a day-to-day basis outside of that engagement, once you have your profile and the branding down. So there's different types of content. There's your professional content, and then what I would call engagement content. And engagement content, the more personal type of content, will always get more engagement. And therefore, the next time you have professional content, it'll get a little boost in the algorithm. So you actually want to have both. And that engagement content. I mean, it's hard enough to get some MSP founders to talk professionally on LinkedIn and become a content creator, even if it's technical and professional. It's even harder to go the personal route. And that's why I recommend, if you're not doing this, start with the professional technical side, putting your own storytelling into it. So it becomes quasi-personal, right? It becomes your story, unique to you and your brand, your company, your story, your services, what have you. But slowly over time, you also want to consume other people's content, right? You can, if you're listening, you didn't know this, you can follow people on LinkedIn without connecting to them, just like you follow people on an Instagram. So that's an easy way if you don't want to connect with anyone and everyone. If you want to sort of see what your competitors are doing, what other MSP owners are doing, I highly recommend you do some searches, you find some MSP owners that are, actively publishing content. And inevitably, Paul, whenever I do like a social selling training, I'll always try to find the one or two people in the organization or at competitors who are already doing this pretty savvily. And that is the best way to convince others, right? When they see, oh my gosh, that person's getting like 100 likes and 20 comments in every post, they sort of wake up to the opportunities that exist there. So that would be my advice, not just publish, but consume from your industry. And I think over time, you're going to get it. The light bulb's going to switch on and you're going to find a way to craft your own unique story. And, maybe it isn't directly related, maybe like ransomware, like my father, may he rest in peace. He got hit by ransomware. He lost decades of photos from his personal computer. Now, I hope that this never happens to anybody that's listening, but even something like a ransomware or cybersecurity, it also affects us personally. And you could share those personal stories from yourself or anecdotally. And it's engaging content. I mean, I don't want it to be negative content, but it indirectly also relates to what you do, right? So you need to find those different angles. The Venn diagram overlaps is, I think, where you're going to find your best success.
I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. Final question for you, Neal. Let's talk about AI. So we all know there's 1,000 AI tools out there. Another 1,000 were released just today. So there's plenty of AI tools. We all know now the limitations of what it can and can't do. In terms of creating content, where do you think that fits in? Because we've talked a lot here about essentially authenticity and being the real you and using the platform in that way. And obviously AI is not the real you. So how do you recommend MSPs use AI to augment and make that LinkedIn content just easier?
Yeah, so I'll start with the comment on tools. So I, like many others, because I'm in the digital marketing industry, was, when all these tools came out, I was a big fan of them. I didn't even use ChatGPT because I was so interested in all the different tools, which provide different recipes, which basically tee up all these. You want, a LinkedIn newsletter, boom, right? You want a Google ad, boom. And then I realized over time, and especially because some of these tools had their own webinars and they were showing what they were doing, that I could basically do the same thing in ChatGPT. And that, to me, is the only tool I think you need for AI today. There's other specialized tools out there, don't get me wrong, but I would go deep in the ChatGPT. Some like Claude better, some like Google better. Pick one, but I would start to organize everything in there and allow it to use its machine learning to better understand you, your voice, your products, your industry, what have you. So that's step number one, is finding that tool. To me, it's ChatGPT. It's a series of custom GPTs. The next thing is, what is your content creation workflow, right? So as many say, AI is not a strategy, right? And I used to say social media replaces nothing, it complements everything. And the exact same thing is for AI. So how are you creating content now? And inevitably, you're going to find you start with an idea. And AI is great for ideas. We talked before we started the recording of how we can get ideas. You don't know what to talk about today or this week or this month? Ask ChatGPT for ideas. Tell them who your target audience is, what you normally talk about, what interests them. And you're going to get lots of ideas. Some are going to be okay, some are going to be bad, but there might be one or two good ones that you can work with and reflect upon. So you have the idea, you create the content, and then you edit the content. Grammarly is a great, AI editing tool, for lack of a better word. And then you publish the content. And where ChatGPT and AI really shines, it's in the ideation and in the repurposing. So if you are creating blog content, or the podcast is a great example. Video podcasts are the king of repurposing. I know that your MSP is probably not doing a podcast. That's okay. But I just want, for analogy's sake, to understand that, and I do the same thing with my own podcast, is that we can take the video, we can grab the audio transcript. I use Otter.ai. I don't use ChatGPT for transcript. I think Otter is the best AI transcript tool. I then cut and paste that transcript, put it into ChatGPT, and from that, I can create anything I want, right? I can create a LinkedIn newsletter. I can create, an email summary, a LinkedIn post. And here's the thing. I would never recommend you use AI to create content from scratch. But if it's already your content, it's already your voice, You don't need to have a podcast. You can record yourself into your iPhone, right? And then upload that transcript or use the Otter.ai app, right? And then put that into ChatGPT. Anything that you create that is a derivative of that content is already you. It's already your perspective, your thoughts. From there, yes, you can, edit it as I think you should, but it's you, right? So you've already gone over that hurdle of creating AI content, which is not going to engage. It's going to be very bland. You're not going to make any progress with it. But when you start to use your own content and you edit it and then publish it, the end reader will not think it's AI content because it will reflect what you have to say, and especially that final edit when you put it in a more human voice. Right. But if you are telling, what AI cannot do is convey emotion and storytelling. And if you can do that in your content that you feed into ChatGPT, you've just solved the biggest issue, and you are way ahead of the competitors who are still just churning out AI generated content. So I think every MSP owner, every MSP company listening should be leaning pretty heavily in to AI at this point. I think 90% of businesses around the world already are, or at least in the United States. So it is a no-brainer, but be careful how you use it. Make sure that, if you go according to my advice, you're not just creating AI generated content that is just going to make the world more noisier. It is a more strategic use of AI that's actually going to save you more time, so that, wow, I already have, my content set up for the next week. Great. Spend that time to engage. Spend that time to create, to spend more time crafting better content. Dig back into the stories, not just of the MSP owner. What about your sales team? What are the stories that they're facing with customers, or customer success stories, right? You can then begin to be more of an artist in terms of engaging with people and creating even better content.
Yeah, I love this. So using AI as an augmentation tool rather than actually the be all and end all in itself. Great advice. Thank you, Neal.
Amen.
Tell us about what you do. So you've got books, you've got podcasts, obviously you're a fractional CMO as well. Tell us about all of these things and how we can get in touch with you.
Sure. Well, I am Neal Schaffer, the real Neal. So it's NealSchaffer. So nealschaffer.com, Neal Schaffer in the socials. Hey, hit me up on LinkedIn. Would love to connect and continue the conversation. You can find my books on Amazon. I actually have a book printer in the UK for those listening there. So you can get it pretty quickly there. It's not being shipped out from America, but on Amazon or wherever else you buy books. And I also have a podcast called Your Digital Marketing Coach Podcast if you want to get a broader perspective on everything digital marketing.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.